We live in a world that needs love. We live in a world that needs some light and some connection and hope and peace. And we have the opportunity to be a part of that, to be a people who lean into the graciousness of God's love and to share that. And so we are people who have connected with God in some kind of way that makes us come to a place like this and want to hear about more who Jesus is and how we can live that out. That we are people that God has shown hospitality to and says, I want you to share this love with those people around you. And that this isn't a religious thing. It isn't something that is sterile and put on a shelf, but it is something that we engage with, that this is life. One of the things I always hate is when people say, well, when I worked in the real world, or when I, in the real world, as if the Christian life is something that is separate from the real world. It's not. We're right in the middle of it. But so often we treat it as something we set aside for Sunday morning, or go, this is just something I practice to help. No, it's a life transformation, that God is Lord over all things, and He's called us into His light, and that there are people that are hoping to see a glimpse of heaven, that it's not to be something that we just wait for one day, that we can engage in now. And that's where we come into play. That we are a people who are called to alert others to the universal reign of God through Jesus Christ. And we do that by our words, by declaring it, and by demonstrating it. And my belief is that if we've had an encounter with Christ, and that He has awoken our spirit, and we are alive to His presence, then we will demonstrate it and practice. We will be little Jesuses. And that if we practice it, that people will ask us questions, and then we'll be able to declare it. And so last week we talked about evangelism and the idea of how do we become evangelists, because evangelism is the dirty little word in the Christian faith that everyone thinks as soon as I say evangelism that we're called to go knock on doors and be the person that is the reason that the little camera doorbells, what are they called? I didn't understand any of that. Blink? Ring. I have ring. I have one. Thank you I couldn't remember what I had. Ring. It's the reason ring exists is for that, we don't want to be the person that ring exists for. And on the other side of the doorbell, it took a long way to get to that joke. But what is evangelism? Last week we talked about, Paul said there's two of them. There's big E, those that are gifted with the gift to share the word in articulate ways to go about and tell people about Jesus. Then there's a little E that most of us fall in the category of, and that we are called, as Paul and Peter say, to be ready when people ask about the faith and love that we have for God. When people recognize and they see that, they go, tell me more about that. That we are called to live questionable lives. I gave the metaphor of the movie theater. You go to the movie theater, you see the big blockbuster preview that's coming out, it gives you chills, and you punch your buddy and go, I want to go see that. And we are called to be the preview to the greatest blockbuster, Jesus Christ's return. But in the meantime, that we are glimpses of heaven, that when people see us, they go, yeah, I want to be a part of that. That seems intriguing to me. And then they ask questions, and that opens us a way to have a dialogue. But the problem is we've so sequestered ourselves from everyone else that we never have chance to give dialogue. We stop living questionable lives. We live a life that looks like just everybody else. We've made Christianity to be something that's synonymous with Western culture, when it's so much more than that. And as a matter of fact, it will challenge Western culture, that if Christianity is true, it pops up in every culture. That we live in a faith which we can say that Jesus is Lord, therefore Caesar is not. Do you understand what I mean by that? That Jesus is Lord, therefore presidents are not. That Congress, men and women are not. That dictators and kings and queens are not. We live in a place in which we reflect the principles and the life of Jesus Christ. That means our lives will be questionable. People will go, that you're different. So how do we do that? Last week I gave the assignment, if you remember what it was, to do what? It's with more confidence than that. It starts with a B and rhymes with less. Bless. We are called to bless. Yeah, you picked up. We're called to bless. And we were called to bless how many people last week? 3, that's right. At least one person not within your faith community. And I hopefully you got to practice that. I'm wondering if anyone was able to practice that this week that'd like to share a story and how they were able to bless someone and what that was like. Was anyone brave enough to share with me?
I have a childhood friend who is incarcerated. He's serving life plus 30 years, and we've kind of drifted apart over the last several years. And so last week, I took the opportunity to write him a note to encourage him and to tell him that he's loved and basically that we're still praying for him.
Amen. That's great. Anybody have a story they'd like to share? What's that? I thought maybe you had a story about chickens, but you're saying, you can't say they're chickens and not say anything.
Hi, I was out to lunch last Monday with 15 women and one teenage waitress, and you can imagine the women who wanted no lemon versus a lot of lemon and no ice versus a lot of ice. So I blessed the waitress with a very large tip, and it was just between the waitress and I. But here is how God works in our lives. I have a lot of papers I need to go through, and I have someone who does that for me. The next day, we were going through old files, and what do you suppose I found in one of my old files? This exact same amount I had given to the waitress. So now I have to bless someone else this week with that exact same amount.
That's awesome. Is anybody else? I know there's other stories. I know that speaking in public is one of the it's like the number one fear before falling out of a plane. It's crazy. But the thing is, what I notice, maybe you notice this too, as soon as I start with this assignment of going, okay, I need to bless 3 people, it changes how I look at people. It changes how I looked at my week because I start thinking, okay, what are the ways that I can bless in this moment? Then I start looking for opportunities. And then what happens is I know that there's sometimes I'll think of things that maybe I'll see somebody and go, oh, man, that person has really neat shoes. I really like those shoes. But I'll never say it out loud. And so, and this isn't like those stories, but it's just a small example of me just trying to open my mouth more. So this isn't necessarily one, but I remember this guy had really cool shoes on. His whole outfit was pretty rad. And I was like, man, I really love those shoes. And he's like, thanks. And he seemed like really surprised. And then I saw him go to look at my shoes because he wanted to return the compliment. And I wanted to go, you don't have to, because I knew what my shoes were like. And but it was pretty funny moment. He didn't say anything, which is, I kind of hit him. But I started looking at people and then finding opportunities to share and bless someone. Maybe there's conversations that normally I would withhold, but here I'm going to share this, or a time to gift someone, or and bless someone with a gift or something. It starts changing how we engage our week, because now we're looking for opportunities. And I'm telling you, if you pray, God, show me an opportunity. And if you're wondering if God answers prayers, pray that prayer. Pray the prayer, God, give me an opportunity to share your love this week or this day. And I guarantee you, it's never failed when I've prayed that an opportunity has not presented itself. And so there's that idea of how do we do that? Well, the next step is this week is about eating. One of our favorite things, eating food. We can't live without food. And what's amazing is the food industry has become this incredible business. I'm going to show you a series of photos here. I'm going to see if I can keep up with it. I've missed it every service. But we have Cupcake Wars, Master Chef Nailed It, Kitchen Nightmares, Chopped Rotten, Taco Chronicle, Street Food, Somebody Feed Phil, Final Table, Cooked, and Sugar Rush. Yes, I made it, and now I'm going to lose it. We have Freshly Blue Apron, Hello Fresh, Plated, Peach Dish, Home Chef, all these different mail things where we mail food out. We have over 550 restaurants in Wellington alone. And then there's all the meals that we eat throughout the year. We have Christmas dinner, Easter dinners, Thanksgiving dinners, and sports food dinners. We are always eating. We have 7 days a week, 3 meals a day. That's 21 meals. And if you're a Hobbit, you get a few extra. You get second lunch and second breakfast and second dinners. And we have all kinds of ways that we are engaged in food in some ways. And I found it amazing that those shows that I mentioned about food, I'm holding back a sneeze. I have allergies, not anything else. But all those shows, those were just a handful of the shows that I saw just briefly skimming through Netflix. It's amazing, and I've wondered, with the advance of technology, what's fascinating is that we have an increase of people being lonely and disconnected and isolated. Now, technology has also provided ways for people to connect, but it's also been a thing that's kept us from connecting with others and learning how to connect, and so we've had a higher rate of people saying that they're lonely and isolated. And I've wondered if this rise in food has also been for people looking for new ways to connect with other people. Because food has been central to our life. It's central to our cultures. Every culture has something that they do with food that tells their stories. It's amazing if you go into all the different places I've been around the world, their food has something connected with their economy, something connected with their heritage, something connected with their ancestors that's been passed down and down. Now, some people understand how it's connected, some people don't, but there's something there that connects us. The reason why some foods are prominent in different cultures and not, and some out of abundance, some out of despair and lack and scarcity. But we find these different stories. I've always been amazed. It's funny, just even with the United States, the different regions that we have, how we treat food. I was raised on Southern cooking, and so what Southern cooking means is this. We will take any healthy food and make it unhealthy. We're brilliant at it. My mother would take peaches and freeze them. They're amazing, and I would even eat them, half frozen. But they were preserved with sugar, like so much sugar in them. And then collard greens, which are really healthy for you. But you can't have collard greens without fat back in it. And you gotta, we'll take vegetables, we'll fry them, it's amazing. Grits, I know we have a lot of people from the north. I'm sure grits were kind of a new thing when you came down, and people would always tell you, if you say, I don't like grits. I said, well, that means you're eating it wrong. You need to put a pound of butter and some sugar, maybe some bacon, the cheese in it. There's lots of ways you can make grits, and it's wonderful. But how we do it, how we talk about it, and how it can become cross-cultural, how it can bind two different groups that wouldn't normally hang out together, and then over food, they end up bonding and hearing each other's stories. Because something happens at the table. Something happens. It was at the table with my own family growing up. Now, I was an only child, so our tables weren't that eventful. I was never arguing with the sibling. I didn't have to fight over the cereal box or anything like that. But when we would go visit my family in Mississippi, all the cousins and uncles and aunts and second cousins and first cousins once removed, and everyone's telling you how you're related to somebody. And we had this table. Actually, the table, my dining room table, was the one it was my grandmother's, but every leaf would be in it, so you could fit 14 million people around it and cram as many people and elbows as you could there, and the food would be brought out. My grandmother, I swear, never had a warm meal in her life because she was always bringing food out, and we were always telling her to sit down and eat, and she'd always complain. She goes, "Is your food cold?" And she didn't get it why her food was always cold and ours wasn't. And the same. I mean, it was the same conversation every year, but that was part of the ritual. And then there was the telling of stories. I learned stories about my parents at that table. I'd hear my grandmother and grandfather just go at each other, and their love language was arguing. And it was funny. And because she's this petite and he was giant, and here my uncle, he taught me some magic tricks. And let's see if I can. One of my favorite was the spoon trick. And as a kid, he would do this thing. He'd take the spoon and he would take it, and he would take my mother's good silver, my grandmother's good silver, and take it, and he would bend it over like this, and afterwards, boom, it was not bent, except I didn't know the magic trick, and I wanted to be just like my uncle, so I took my grandmother's good silver, and I did this, and I was like, how did you get it to go straight? My grandmother's going, what did you do? And then they got more mad at him. But he also told me how to turn a napkin into a bra. It's a great trick, too. I decided not to show that one. But, yeah, bring me a cloth napkin later, I'll show you. But life happens. How much life happens around a cup of coffee? Do you remember having midnight meals with your family? And you still do, and it's that conversation. And how many meals have I had, or cups of coffee after a funeral, or after a wedding, after families coming together in the middle of the night? The only time my mom might be able to catch me is when I was coming in late and getting the cold fried chicken out of the fridge, which was awesome, and a cup of coffee, and sitting here having conversations. And life seems to happen. And meeting my friends at coffee shops and just saying, how are you? How's it going? And spilling our heart over a cup of coffee, a soda, other drinks. And what might it be? That life happens in there. There's something that happens in connection. And it's not the food that is magical, but there's something about it that we need food. And we need the conversation. We look at Scripture, and you see food is prevalent through there. The very first story that we have in Scripture about understanding how we are connected in this life and with each other is surrounded about food and how we've broken that connection. And then Jesus brings wine and bread. And the first miracle he does is turning water into wine, and he uses bread and wine to reconnect us with God. It's always there about reconnecting us and bringing us into life that we might know life. It's an amazing thing that we have. And the New Testament has Jesus always around some kind of food. Luke, it seems like he eats his way through from story to story. And it's amazing when we think about what the Son of Man came. Now, it'll say several times, the Son of Man came to do something. And fill this blank in your head, but the Son of Man came not to serve, but not to be served, but to serve. And that's in Mark. And then in Luke, it says, the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. And the third one, I love this one, the Son of Man came eating and drinking. You see, the first two talked about what Jesus came to do, and the third one was how he did it. There was a connection there. People are looking for connection. We have the light of Christ, and Jesus says it happens in the everyday moments. And so to be an evangelist, to share the good news, to alert people to the kingdom of God, it happens in the everyday moments. We don't have to ritualize it and make it something that's so foreign to everything else, but it is in the dirt, in the minutia, in the ordinariness of life that the extraordinary happens. That's what God does with us. I love all the different stories that he has of sitting with of his guests, and he says in one of them, in Luke, he says, when you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you. And another place in Luke, it says, when one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A fascinating thing happened. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. And so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. And she stood behind him at his feet, weeping. She began to wet his feet with her tears, and then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. It was at the table, at meeting in that place. She was longing for connection. And what I love about Jesus' approach here is he just listens to her. He lets her be present. That's what we're called to do. So often we go through life kind of at an arm's length and never connecting with anyone. And we wonder why we can't connect with other people and bring them into the church, into the presence of God. It's because we've stopped connecting with other people. What we've done is we've become a people that we go, it's the other. We make people the other. And the truth is we have to have the differences and the strange, and we bring them all in. And Jesus says, come to the table, sit with me, eat with me. That's why I love communion, is that Jesus calls them friends, knowing that they're going to betray him, that they're going to abandon him, they're going to leave him. He says, your friends, come eat with me. And then he tells us, go and do likewise. We're called to share the love of Christ, to create habits in our life in which people can connect with God. And I want to say this, that evangelism is not a program. Sharing the gospel is not a thing you check off your good Christian checklist. Evangelism is part of our story that happens when we do life together. And I don't know about you, but how many have been concerned about division in our country and our world? Anybody? Anybody concerned? Anybody get concerned with the way that they see people talk about topics on Facebook? And I don't know if you're about me, that there's sometimes I have the urge to want to correct everyone and go, you've got it wrong, and I've got the right answer, and I've got to bite my tongue because that doesn't do any good. The way for us to change is if that many of us have concerns about it, and I want to tell you statistically that means probably most of us are part of the problem as well as part of the issue, but we can also be part of the solution in how we engage. But it begins by recognizing the humanity and the other person, of engaging them. What are the habits that you're creating? If you want to see a miracle done and you want to see an answered prayer, ask God if you can be a part of what he's doing. You'll see a miracle happen. You'll see a prayer answered. Evangelism is not that program. It's not a checklist, like I said. The best way to ensure that we never have an opportunity to share the love of God with others is to never engage them. So if you want to engage people with the love of God and discover the love of God yourself, you have to create situations in which you can engage other people. If we desire to open ourselves up to the work of God in our life, we will look for opportunities to engage others. And that's what this week is about. How do you engage others in such a way that you can hear their story and allow God to move you into a moment where they might speak peace into your life and you might speak peace into their life? You've got to create new habits. What the saying is, you're doing everything right to get the results you're getting today. And if you want new results, you have to do something different. And so the new habit, what I'm asking you to do, is to take on the example of Christ and have meal with people. And a meal could be a full-blown meal. Open your house up to hospitality to people that you normally wouldn't. Maybe create some kind of reach out to other people, get to know them. Maybe it's a cup of coffee. For me, that's the best place. For me, it's having a cup of coffee, going somewhere quiet where I can hear your story and say, let me hear your story. And I pray, God, show me an opportunity which I can share your love today. I dare you to pray that every day. It's a scary prayer because I know it's the one prayer that God will answer. And so if you're nervous about sharing the love of Christ, good. Lean into it. Be nervous. Embrace it. Pray that. So the habit this week, the first habit last week was what? Bless. This week is eat. I mean, we love eating. Eat. Invite 3 people to eat with you this week, and whether it's a coffee, donuts, a breakfast, lunch, second lunch, dinner, whatever it might be. 3 people, at least one person who's not of your faith. Hear their story. This doesn't mean that we go out and go, hey, you want to go eat lunch, and let me tell you about Jesus. We're not asking to do that. It's, hey, let's have lunch. Let me hear your story. And if you've prayed that prayer, God will move through that. And he'll give you the right time. It may be that week, it may not. Remember, people are not a mission. They're not a project. They're people. Engage them. Don't make it a missional checkoff list. Make it a habit of practice that you're out blessing people and eating with people and sharing life with others. I'll leave you with this question. One of the things that people say is, I'll say, are we inviting people to church to join us? And well, everyone I know is already here. It feels like that, right? Everyone we know is here, especially if you've been in church for a long enough time. Well, my father had the most annoying statement ever, especially as a teenager. So I'm going to share it with you. He says, there's nothing to it but to do it. So if everyone you know is here, get to know some new people. That doesn't mean you get rid of your old friends. Engage others. There's nothing to it but to do it. Can you imagine hearing that as a teenager? Well, son, there's nothing to it but to do it. So I give you that same annoying phrase. We just got to do it. Would you stand with me for our closing hymn? And